the automatic camera clicked in a steady rhythm as Major Robert "Cowboy" Stout guided his F-6F Hellcat above the island. He was flying at roughly 8,000 feet, on the 12th day of September in 1944. His assignment was straightforward: record images of the northern airstrip and return to the carrier USS Hornet. Analysts had told him the location had been abandoned, damaged earlier by heavy strikes. It was supposed to be quiet, safe, routine. But as he looked downward, something in his chest tightened. The runway was not empty. It was crowded. Aircraft from the opposing force filled the field from one end to the other. Sleek fighters. Larger bombers. Dozens of them arranged wingtip to wingtip. Rows of fuel barrels glimmered in the sun. Mechanics moved between engines and propellers in organized motion. This was no forgotten airfield. It was a launch point preparing for something significant. With quick calculation, he estimated no fewer than 40 aircraft, fueled and ready. And he knew what they were waiting for. In only 3 days, thousands of Marines would approach those very shores in one of the largest amphibious landings of the Pacific Campaign. The fleet carrying them was already moving. If these aircraft remained operational, they could strike the incoming landing force with devastating effect before they ever reached land. Protocol for a reconnaissance pilot was clear: observe, communicate, return. Aerial reconnaissance was meant to guide decisions, not initiate them. Engaging alone against a fortified airstrip equipped with anti-air defenses was the kind of action that, on paper, bordered on impossible. Yet Stout also understood how long the chain of command could take to react. Reports needed reviewing. Missions required planning. By the time a coordinated strike could be assembled, the opposing force would have dispersed the aircraft, concealed them, or worse, launched them directly toward the fleet. The Marines who would soon approach the beaches did not have extra time. They did not have hours. They needed action in that moment. Stout gained altitude, observing the entire field with the precision of someone who had seen battle many times before. In their rush to prepare, his opponents had made a critical mistake: the aircraft were positioned too close to one another, surrounded by exposed fuel supplies. It would take only one ignition to create a chain reaction that could ripple across the entire airstrip. He reviewed his available firepower: 6 Browning machine guns chambered in .50 caliber with roughly 2,400 rounds. That translated to only about 12 seconds of continuous firing. Not nearly enough to disable each aircraft individually. But more than enough to start a fire that would spread on its own. Stout was not inexperienced. At 28 years of age, he had completed more than 60 combat missions. He had engaged in aerial duels, provided close support under heavy fire, and landed on carriers through storms that grounded others. He was not careless. He was deliberate. He understood the difference between courage and recklessness. What he was considering now existed directly between the two. If he moved to strike, every anti-air defense on that airstrip would respond. He would be alone. No support. No backup. A single damaging hit to his engine or cockpit would leave him with nowhere to go but the dense jungle below, where rescue would be impossible. But if he chose not to act, those 40 aircraft could launch in coordinated waves, targeting the landing craft and troop transports during their most vulnerable approach. He had seen what that looked like before. The result was chaos. The decision formed quickly in his mind. Stout eased the throttle forward and guided the Hellcat into a diving angle. This would be fast. Direct. Precise. He would strike the exposed fuel first. That would be the spark that changed everything. He dropped down through the humid air, the altimeter needle spinning as the ground rose up beneath him. At roughly 2,000 feet he leveled off and advanced the throttle fully. The Hellcat surged forward, the engine sounding strained and ferocious. Jungle treetops blurred under his wings as he skimmed just 50 feet above the canopy. The airstrip came into view in a sudden clearing. Below, the ground crews paused, confused. Some stared upward. Others ran for cover. None reached their defensive positions in time. Stout aligned his sights with the northern cluster of aircraft. He pressed the trigger. All 6 of the Browning guns erupted at once, the sound vibrating through the cockpit. Bright tracer lines stitched across the runway, tearing through the thin metal skin of a fighter on the end of the row. Fuel misted into the air from ruptured tanks. He shifted his aim slightly, now targeting the fuel drums arranged between 2 medium-sized aircraft. The bullets punched through the metal containers, releasing fuel in a shimmering spray. One shot made contact just the right way, and the airstrip ignited. A flash bloomed into a fireball that engulfed the aircraft on either side. The flames rose higher than he expected, towering into the sky. Heat rattled his aircraft as he pulled upward sharply. The blaze began to spread in all directions. One burning wing touched another. Then another. Each ignition fed the next, a series of expanding firestorms racing across the runway. The entire northern row was now caught in a chain reaction of burning fuel and metal. On the ground, personnel abandoned any attempt to save the aircraft and sprinted in all directions. Defensive crews finally reached their weapons and began firing, but Stout was already climbing, weaving, making his Hellcat a moving target. Tracer rounds arced past the wings. A few found their mark. He felt the aircraft tremble as impacts ripped through the tail. Warning lights flickered. The controls stiffened slightly. He climbed to regain altitude, but the engine still answered him. Nearly half of the aircraft were now engulfed, black smoke rising like a signal visible from miles away. But the southern half of the runway remained untouched. Another 20 planes. Ready. Waiting. Threatening. He checked his remaining ammunition. Half. Only about 6 seconds of firing time left. The air defenses below were fully alert now. To approach again was to fly directly into a storm of fire. He rolled the aircraft inverted and dove again. The hostile fire began immediately. Threads of glowing round streaked past the canopy. He shifted left, then right, never allowing the gunners to hold aim. The Hellcat shook with each near miss. He came in from a different angle this time, targeting larger aircraft positioned near a fuel truck. The remaining rounds tore into metal, fabric, and fuel. The truck exploded with a shockwave powerful enough to flip a nearby aircraft upside down. That ignition lit crates of stored supplies, which began detonating one after another. The row of aircraft at the southern end of the strip became a continuous blaze, joined with the fire already consuming the northern section. His guns clicked empty. No rounds left. The attack was finished. His job now was to escape. The Hellcat felt heavier as he pulled upward once again, damaged control surfaces resisting movement. Smoke trailed behind him. More warning lights glowed across the instrument panel. Something was leaking. Something was cracked. But the engine still held. Below him, the runway was no longer an airfield. It was a burning landscape. Every aircraft. Every fuel barrel. Every wooden structure. Engulfed. The column of smoke rising above the island marked the site like a dark monument. Stout guided the Hellcat toward open water and began the flight back to the carrier. The flight back felt stretched and heavy. The rush of adrenaline faded, replaced by the steady awareness of damage. The controls resisted him. The instrument panel flickered warnings he couldn't afford to dwell on. Oil pressure dipping. Hydraulic levels unstable. A faint trail of smoke streaming behind him like a ribbon marking his path through the sky. He knew the situation. One more hole in the wrong line, one valve broken, one spark in the engine, and the Hellcat would fail. There would be no smooth landing if that happened. Only jungle. Only silence. But the engine continued to push, steady and determined, like it understood the urgency the same way he did. The carrier finally appeared against the blue horizon. He radioed in, voice controlled but strained, explaining the damage and uncertainty about the landing gear. The deck crew cleared the flight deck. The ship turned into the wind. Everyone aboard understood what was about to happen. He lowered the gear. One wheel locked into place. The other only partially extended. Not ideal. Not stable. He had no second attempt. This would be his only approach. The landing was abrupt. The Hellcat struck the deck hard, catching the second arresting cable. The aircraft slammed forward with enough force to bend metal and jolt every bone in his body. The deck crew rushed in, surrounding the aircraft instantly. They stopped when they saw the condition of the plane. The tail was torn. Holes were punched clean through the fuselage. The paint was charred from heat. The entire aircraft carried the scars of what had just occurred. Stout climbed down, boots touching the deck. He found himself facing a group of officers, each with questions ready. One wanted to know why a reconnaissance pilot had returned with clear combat damage. Another questioned why he had broken radio silence. Another demanded to know what had actually happened over the island. His reply was plain, steady, and without embellishment: the airfield was not abandoned. It was filled with aircraft preparing for an attack. They are gone now. The officers paused. One asked him to repeat the quantity. He said it again: 40 aircraft destroyed. There was disbelief. Doubt. Silence. But reconnaissance photos taken afterward confirmed the truth. The next morning, the airstrip was a blackened expanse. Burned aircraft scattered like shadows frozen in place. Structures collapsed. Fuel stores gone. Exactly 40 planes no longer able to launch. Because of that, when the Marines landed, the skies above them were clear. They would still face challenges: harsh terrain, fortified positions, determined defenders, but they did not face waves of aircraft striking them as they approached the shore. The action Stout had taken had prevented tragedy before it began. For this, the Navy awarded him the Navy Cross, the second highest recognition for courage in action. The citation emphasized unwavering resolve and the ability to act decisively when the mission required it. But Stout himself rarely spoke about what he had done. After the conflict ended, he returned home to California. He lived quietly, working, raising his family, not seeking attention or praise. The medal remained in a drawer rather than displayed on a wall. To those who asked, he would say only that he saw a threat and removed it. He believed others would have done the same. But most would not have. Most would have followed orders exactly as written. They would have reported back, waited for instruction, waited for procedure. And by then, the moment would have been gone. Historians later examined the mission. They compared the written reports, the filed photographs, and accounts from both sides. What initially sounded exaggerated became recognized as one of the most decisive individual actions of the entire conflict in the Pacific. One pilot, in one aircraft, acting within the span of only 8 minutes, had prevented what would have been a sudden and overwhelming aerial strike on the landing force. The Marines who stepped onto the coral shores never knew that the skies were clear because of a choice made miles above them, days before their arrival. They faced difficult terrain and well-organized defenses carved into ridges and hidden positions, where progress was measured one slow step at a time. The fighting endured for more than 2 months and cost nearly 2,000 American lives. Even with the skies protected, it was one of the hardest campaigns of the region. Yet without Stout's action, the losses would likely have been far greater. Analysts later estimated that his decision may have spared anywhere from 500 to 1,000 lives on the first day alone. A single judgment call, made in seconds, had altered the starting conditions of an entire operation. After returning to civilian life, Stout did not pursue recognition. He did not speak of his decision as heroic. He spoke of it as necessary. Those who knew him described a person steady and humble, someone who did not seek attention or retell dramatic stories. His family learned the full extent of what he had done only years later, through research and archival records. What made his action stand out was not just skill, but the clarity with which he understood his purpose. His written orders instructed him to gather information and return. But the broader intention behind those orders, the protection of the landing force, was what guided him. He recognized the difference between following instructions and fulfilling the mission they were designed to achieve. The moment required initiative, not hesitation. Action, not delay. Modern aviation courses now study his choice. Not only as an example of precise flying under pressure, but as a model of decision-making when clarity and time are limited. They examine how he identified the most critical weakness, focused his resources on the point where they would have maximum effect, and withdrew the moment the objective was met. Not lingering. Not chasing additional risk. Everything about the attack demonstrated discipline, judgment, and the ability to act when no one else could make the call for him. Robert "Cowboy" Stout passed away in the year 2005 at the age of 89. His story, once quiet and almost forgotten, has since found its way into historical work, lectures, and discussions of strategy. What endured was not the number of planes destroyed, or the decoration he received, but the principle his actions represented. Sometimes the person closest to the situation understands what must be done more clearly than the ones giving instructions from far away. And sometimes, fulfilling the true intent of a mission requires the courage to step beyond the exact words written on the page. He saw what needed to happen. He knew the risk. He acted anyway. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan.